Hello, and welcome to this presentation on poll greeting for Election Day. My name is Jen Rieger Murphy. I'm a committee member and vice chair of the Ridley Township Democratic Committee. I've been on the committee since 2017 and have worked elections in Ridley since 2016. I have experience serving as a poll greeter, poll watcher, and clerk, and look forward to sharing information that can help you in your role on Election Day. This presentation was created specifically for poll greeters serving on Election Day, and it's for both new and returning workers. We'll cover things to consider before Election Day and the goals of your particular role. We'll talk about the resources you'll have at the polling location, the key people you may meet on Election Day, and we'll end with greeting tips and techniques and frequently asked questions. I want to talk to you about the value of greeting. I one time asked a friend if she wanted to help me greet at the polls. She asked me if it was an effective use of time. Emphatically, I said it's an invaluable role, and here's why. Historically, Ridley has been dominated by Republicans. When I first started greeting, I was the only one there for the Democrats. There were 5 men greeting for the Republican side. I imagine that before I started working there, it was just them. Imagine being a voter and walking by 5 men handing you sample ballots for the opposition. And you might not even know right off the bat that they were the opposition. Poll greeters in other precincts have confirmed similar experiences. But over the past 5 election cycles, we've seen a shift thanks to our Democratic poll greeters. Now we have 2 greeters per shift, and I've even seen a reduction in greeters on the Republican side. Democrats are increasing their presence at the polls, and voters really appreciate this. Democrats sometimes think they are the only ones on their street representing their party, and by having a presence at the polls, we're showing them that we are here and growing our community. This also gives Democrats inspiration to get involved. We have had people come up to us after voting to say that they want to do what we're doing the next election. So every year we build upon that and get stronger. Greeting is crucial to building the party, to building our volunteer base during the year, and ultimately this leads to increasing voter turnout. Next, we'll talk about the greeter goals. An overall goal as a greeter is to be a friendly face and positive representative of the Democratic Party and the candidates. As greeters, we strive to be a welcoming presence to all voters who are there to exercise their civic duty. Greeters will also have the opportunity to give sample ballots to the voters. This is something that voters can take inside with them when voting and refer to it at the ballot box. A sample ballot will clearly list all Democrats and the positions for which they are running. Most people will have made up their minds before coming to the polls, but it's important for us to offer these guides to any voter who will take them so that they can be clear on the candidates that represent our party. We've seen Republican greeters offering their ballots to everyone passing by, so whenever possible, Democratic greeters should also offer a ballot as well. Greeters will be supplied with stickers that say I voted, and these are a hot ticket item. And this is something many voters enjoy picking up on their way out of the polls. We'd recommend offering them to every voter regardless of party, which may or may not be known to you at the time. As a greeter, you may also get questions from voters, and we will cover frequently asked questions later in this presentation. If you don't know the answer to a question, that's perfectly okay. There's always going to be someone that has the answer, or we'll find out. Lastly, there are times where greeters may assist in calling voters during downtime to remind them to come out and vote. This is not a common practice, but may be something you can assist with if you're comfortable and if a polling location is doing this. Next, we'll talk about pre-election day prep, what to wear and bring with you. As you prep for election day, keep comfort in mind. Wear comfortable but presentable clothes and shoes. Jeans are fine. Remember that you may be standing off and on for a few hours, so shoe choice is important. Many of our polling places are out in the elements. If the forecast is calling for sun, a hat, sunglasses, and sunscreen are good items to have on hand. Consider rain gear for a rainy day forecast, or have a jacket with you for colder temperature elections. If you have a fold-up chair, it's worth having in your car and ready to go. We typically try to provide a table and 2 chairs for each polling location, but having a backup chair would be good, especially if you know you'll definitely need one. Sometimes other poll workers or candidates will bring food to your polling location, but every poll may be staffed and resourced a bit differently. It's always good to have a snack and beverage on hand in case, especially if you're working for an extended period of time. Some people working election day may work a full day or a half day. Other greeters may work a 2 to 3 hour shift. A book could be a good thing to bring with you in case you are covering a shift that is slower or longer and you may experience some downtime. If you are working a full or half day, consider bringing a phone charger for sure. I want to point out the light that is in this photo. A few years ago, one of the greeters at my polling place, her name is Donna, she brought camping lights for the night shift, and it was really, really helpful. So helpful that I went out and bought one for future elections. If you have something like that, or maybe a flashlight, and you're covering a shift where you know it will be dark out, feel free to bring it with you. As you prepare for Election Day, you'll want to review a few details. One will be the polling location where you are assigned. You should be given the address by one of our volunteer coordinators. It's always good to review who is on the ballot as well. You can find sample ballots for the upcoming election at the link at the bottom of this page. We will have a separate brief video you can watch that specifies candidates on the ballot in the upcoming election, but here are the types of positions that you may see in an election depending on the year. At the township level, there are positions for school board, commissioner, which is similar to a borough council, and a magistrate or a judge. There are also elections every 4 years for committee people within a party, such as myself, and for election day workers as well, like the judge of elections and the inspectors. At the county level, there are positions for council, sheriff, register of wills, controller, judge, and district attorney. At the state level, you might see candidates for the legislature in Harrisburg. So this would include state representatives and state senators. There may be a governor's race, a lieutenant governor's race, people running for the state level attorney general, treasurer, auditor general, and judge. At the federal level, you'll see candidates running for Congress, US Senate, and President and Vice President of the United States. Lastly, some elections you will see ballot questions that can focus on a local or state level, like a constitutional amendment. So here's a note on elections that we want to be mindful of. There are 2 types of elections, and they're every year in Pennsylvania, a primary election and a general election. Primary elections are held in May, generally, and they are closed primaries. This means if you are a registered Democrat, you can only vote for candidates in your party who will run against the opposing party in the general election. Exceptions to this would be judge positions and school board positions. These are positions where in a primary, these positions, these candidates can cross-file. And this part is really tricky because they will not have a party affiliation like an R or a D next to their name to identify the party that they represent. This is where it's really, really important to have a sample ballot to be handing out to people on that election day. If you have any independent or Green Party or Libertarian voters, they can only vote in a primary if there are ballot questions. No ballot questions, no voting. This is not your responsibility to tell voters, although if it comes up in conversation, you'll have this training in mind. Sometimes independents may find out about this when they sign in at the poll. It's worth noting that on occasion, people forget which party they're registered in. It happens, especially if somebody changes a couple times, they may forget which party they're in. Sometimes voters have arrived to the polls to be surprised that they are registered as a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. It does happen from time to time and typically comes to light in a primary. General elections are held every November. Everyone that's registered, regardless of party, can vote, and they can vote for whomever they want. Every greeter will be given a polling location assignment. You'll have the address and the name of the building, which could be an elementary school, a church, a fire hall, among other types of locations. You may also get a 2-digit number, 6132, etc. This is simply referring to the ward and precinct of the polling location. Ridley Township has 9 wards and 20 precincts, and a precinct is the smallest political unit in the country. Word numbers are not something that you need to know or memorize. It's just more that we're just pointing that out for informational purposes. Our polling places vary in terms of the number of registered Democrats and Republicans. Some precincts have 200 to 500 Democrats. One has 100 Democrats and another one has over 700. But the most important thing is for us to be turning out voters prior to the election, and these are the voters that you'll be greeting. Having 700 Democrats in a precinct really means nothing if they aren't coming out to vote. This map pictured here shows you how the precincts are drawn in Ridley Township. The precincts in red show where Republican registration is higher than that of Democrats. The deeper the red, the higher the registration of Republicans. You'll see that we have some precincts that have a high number of Democratic registered voters, and these are in blue. You'll notice also that there are two green pins, one in 5-2 and one in 4-2. And this is to designate that if independents and Democrats were to turn out in elections there and combine forces and vote for Democratic candidates, they would outnumber Republicans. While Ridley Township Democrats are outnumbered by Republicans overall, we are making inroads, and our votes contribute to blue waves up the ballot. And just a fun fact on this slide, Ridley Township, when viewed on a map, looks like an upside down whale. And you can see that here. So now that you've prepped for the day, we will review what you'll see at your polling places, in most cases the day of. Generally, there will be a table and some chairs. And as mentioned before, if you have a portable chair at home and know you'll need to sit, it would be good to bring one if you have it. We'll have a copy of the staffing schedule with names and phone numbers. We provide sample ballots to hand out to voters as they arrive. They may look different than the ballot itself, but voters will find it helpful to know the Democratic candidates. Each polling place will have a large printed sample ballot that looks exactly like the ballot inside. You can show people this as a reference as well. We'll provide any available publications or handouts on specific candidates that are running. You're also welcome to review their information in advance. We will have I voted stickers to give out to people as they exit the polls. And again, we recommend offering them to everyone regardless of their party affiliation. You will have a volunteer sign-up form as well. This form, though, should only be used in conversation with voters who come up to you and are engaged with you and expressing interest in getting involved. We should refrain from asking everyone if they'd like to get involved, as this can be considered voter intimidation because it would involve collecting their name and contact information. I mentioned earlier that we want to be a friendly face to all voters. We also need to be mindful of keeping the path clear to voters and remain at least 10 feet away from the polling entrance. Otherwise, our actions could be viewed as aggressive or intimidating, even though I know that that would not be our intention. The judge of elections can identify this marker if anyone has questions. If you need to use a restroom or get food inside the polling place, you must make sure that you don't have any political buttons or shirts promoting a candidate or party. Remove or hide any pins, and make sure that if you're wearing a political shirt that you have something to cover it up with when you go inside. So here's a list of people that you may see on election day. First and foremost, we hope that you see a lot of voters to greet. We are trying to get the message out right now that every election matters. You'll likely see candidates, especially if they are running for local office. So your state representatives, maybe your state senator, school board candidates, if it's that particular election time. They may greet voters outside the polling place, but they should not be entering the polling place unless that is the place where they vote and they're there to vote. You'll see Republican greeters handing out sample ballots. Sometimes the number of Republican greeters may outnumber Democratic ones or vice versa, but don't let this concern you. Again, as I mentioned, the first time I ever greeted, I was the lone greeter and I stood by myself all day. And then over time, we started to get more greeters and it tended to even things out. So just know that we're continuing every year to build our team of volunteers. You may also see other greeters representing a specific campaign. They are usually wearing shirts with the candidate's name or logo and handing out only the material for that particular candidate. You may also see the judge of elections or other poll workers if they're coming out for a break or some fresh air. They also might be out to greet some family members on their way to the polls. The judge of elections might also come out to speak with someone if they notice a concern or need to clarify something with one of the workers. They might come out to remind greeters to clear the path. That's one example. Lawyers for election protection sometimes come to the polling location as well, and they'll ask to speak with a poll worker or a poll watcher. They might ask for you for your observations as well. Mainly, do things seem to be running smoothly? Have you noticed any unusually long lines or anyone being turned away from voting? This is usually more common during a presidential or congressional race, but it could happen at any time. If you do have concerns at any time, you should bring them up with a point person at your polling place as soon as possible. So what's going on inside the polls? This is something that's not really going to be too much of a concern to our poll greeters, but I thought I would just give you a quick glimpse into who is working inside the polls. So first and foremost, you have your judge of elections. They're responsible for making sure everything runs smoothly for voters and that the machines are working properly. They also assist any voters who have questions about their registration or polling location. I've seen my judge of election assist people with finding their proper location if they're not at the right polling place. This is an elected position, but the JOE can be appointed if that spot is vacant. There are generally 2 inspectors per precinct, and they manage the sign-in books for voters who are on the rolls. These positions can also be elected, and they can also be appointed. Clerks assist the inspector. They help in recording the order in which the voters come in and vote. And this book can be used if an audit is needed. The position of clerk is appointed. You'll have machine inspectors. They oversee scanning of the ballots and maintaining voter privacy. This is also an appointed position. And lastly, you have poll watchers. So these are people that have certificates from the county and the candidates to observe that everything is running smoothly. Poll watchers come from the Republican Party and the Democratic Party as well. So ideally, you would have people from both parties that are watching the polls. And basically what they would be doing is observing. Are candidates in the polling place? They should not be in the polling place unless they're there just to vote. Are police officers in the polling place? They should really only be there to vote or to preserve the peace if the judge of elections has requested it. Is anyone being turned away without resources? Is someone just saying, oh, this is not where you vote, and expecting them to go figure that out on their own? Are the machines working properly? If they are not, the poll workers in charge should be contacting someone to fix it immediately. Are there enough supplies? Do you have enough ballots to vote with? Are there enough pens? Things like that. Poll watchers can go in and out of the polls throughout the day. They're not required to be in the polling station all day, and it's likely that they will be outside at times. So next we'll talk about sample greeting tips, and I found these to be helpful over the years as I kind of refined my own practice. So as I mentioned, I started greeting a couple years ago, asking people if they'd like a sample ballot. That's what I would say. Would you like a sample ballot? And sometimes a person would say, no, thanks, I already have one, and show me the Republican ballot. Then I decided I needed to refine that statement and be very specific. I started saying, would you like a sample Democratic ballot? And that one word was really the game changer. It quickly identified the party I represented, and it differentiated my ballot from the Republican one. Sometimes you'll get a no way to the question. Do you want a sample Democratic ballot? No way. Others will politely decline if they are, planning to vote Republican. But it is always rewarding when you get a smile from someone that was looking for you and the Democratic ballot. Sometimes a person might respond with, no, I'm a Republican. If it's the general election, I will reply with well, it's a general election. You're free to vote for some Democrats if you'd like. This might not be your style, and that's okay. You don't need to say these things specifically, but you should at the very least make sure that people know that you're giving them a sample Democratic ballot. Some voters may be too shy to decline the Republican ballot and too shy to take the Democratic ballot in front of Republican greeters, especially if they know them. Many of the Republican greeters have positions in the township. So sometimes even if you know someone's a Democrat, they may not take it from you because they don't want the Republicans to know that that's how you vote. So remember that even if a Republican greeter offers their ballot to someone, don't assume that they are Republican. Offer them the Democratic ballot as well. The exception to not doing that would be if you know from past greeting, if you frequent that specific poll and you know someone is only planning to vote Republican, then you shouldn't be asking them if they want a sample Democratic ballot. But 9 times out of 10, you can offer that to them, and they may take it from you. If you're greeting in a primary election in May and someone says they are Republican, you can offer them a Democratic ballot if there are cross-filed races. So if they say, well, I'm a Republican, if there's no cross-filing at all, then there'd be no need to offer them a Democratic ballot because they really can only vote within their party. But remember that in the state of Pennsylvania, judge positions and school board positions, they can cross-file. So there may be opportunities in those instances where you want to showcase some Democrats that will actually appear on their Republican ballot. In addition to offering the sample Democratic ballot, you can also remind voters to complete the whole ballot. Please do that. Sometimes people may vote for some positions and leave others blank, and we really want to encourage everyone to vote up and down the ballot for all of the different races. We want to elect Democrats up and down the ballot. You can also ask them if they have questions, and we will address the frequently asked questions in a moment. As a greeter, you can also keep an eye out for young voters, especially if they're voting for the first time, and make sure that they have their ID with them. And lastly, voters enjoy getting their I voted sticker, so remember to offer this to everyone leaving the polls. Here's what a sample ballot can look like. As mentioned earlier, there will also be a larger example of the actual ballot, and they are usually taped to a wall outside the polling place or hanging up inside the polls so that people can refer to them before they vote. Just a reminder that there is no longer straight party voting in Pennsylvania. It's likely that most people you will encounter have voted in an election since that ruling went into effect, but they need to know to fill out each position and the candidate that they're voting for. There's not just one box that they can fill out and call it a day. So now we'll review the frequently asked questions. These are questions that greeters have received in the past, and these are the most common ones. First and foremost, is this my polling place? For many people, this is not their first time voting at their poll, but for some, they might not be sure if they're in the right place. The poll workers inside will have a book listing all registered voters in the precinct. If they are in the poll and cannot find their name, the judge of elections should be able to help them determine their polling location. If you're in, working a presidential election and the line is really long and someone's asking you, I'm not sure if I'm in the right line to vote. This happens where I work because there's actually 2 precincts in one polling location, and one of the precincts enters on the right side of the building and one precinct lines up on the other side. And there's one line that's much longer than the other. So you definitely don't want someone waiting in a long line that's just going to be asked to go to the other line. So in those cases, you could, first of all, if you're familiar with it, you might have the answer without even having to check. But you could also go to vote411.org or have them do that on their phone. They can enter their address and it will confirm their polling location. So that could save them potentially some time. Most of the lines are not long in general for the elections, so that shouldn't be a concern, but this is a nice resource to have if somebody wanted to check out their polling location in advance. Another question we get is, do I need an ID to vote? Really the only time is if this is their first time voting at the polling place, and our next slide will show acceptable forms of identification. If a voter has a mail-in ballot with them, they have the following options. One, they can find a Dropbox location throughout the county and submit it completed by 8 p.m. on Election Day. They can drop it off at the Delaware County Board of Elections and Media by 8 p.m. on Election Day. If they really want to vote in person, they have several options. They can surrender the ballot and the pre-addressed outer envelope, that's the return envelope, and they can have that voided. After they surrender it, they would sign a declaration, and then they can vote on a regular ballot. If they don't surrender the ballot and return envelope, they can choose to vote provisionally at the polling location. And just a reminder that it is okay if you don't know the answer to any of these questions. We just want to give you as much information as possible, but it's not your responsibility to answer these questions. There will be other people at the polls who can help if you do not know the answer to something. Other poll greeters might know as well. And then we have poll workers inside and also the judge of elections who can assist. Here are the valid forms of ID that voters can use if they're voting for the first time at their polling place. And these can include photo IDs and then options for people who do not have a photo ID. So you'll see one of the ones that's most common is the PA driver's license as far as a photo identification. People can use their passport or their armed forces ID. Some will have a student ID or an employee ID. These are acceptable forms of a photo identification. And then at the bottom, you can see that there are different options for those that might not have a photo ID handy. So a current utility bill with your name and address on it, the current bank statement that you have, a current paycheck, things like that. Okay, so next we'd like to talk about some scenarios that you may see while you're greeting at one of the polling places. The first scenario did happen to us last year. It was an isolated incident, but we do want to just give some ideas of what things you might see so that you know how to respond to them and how to change the situation. So last election, we had a Republican greeter in one of our precincts who was heckling voters and making some disparaging comments about Democrats. The solution here would be to first look for the poll watcher that has been assigned to your group. There will be an email that goes out with a full list of staff at each polling place, so you'll have the names of people, what their roles are in the day, and their contact information, and you'd want to report the issue to that poll watcher. The poll watcher can then talk to the judge of elections and other people inside to see how they can best deal with the situation. If there is no poll watcher on the list, or they've left for a quick break or something like that, you can always call Bella or Jen. Other issues you might encounter. The person that's set to cover the next shift at your polling place doesn't show up to relieve you. You may run out of sample ballots, or you have to leave early for an emergency. You can call Bella and Jen. The next shift doesn't show up, or you have to leave early. So in that case, if you have to leave, just make sure that you've notified us and that the materials are in a safe place, preferably that they can't blow away or get wet if it rains. So if you can cover the materials before you leave, or make sure that they're not blowing in the wind, that would be really appreciated. If you're running low or you're out of sample ballots, you can start by asking voters when they exit if they'd like to recycle their ballot. You might even tell them on the way in, because sometimes they are seen, recycling them inside the polling place. So maybe beforehand would be best. And then Bella or Jen can work to deliver some extra ballots if there are any, and deliver them to the polling place. If a Republican greeter or someone else is blocking the doorway, you can address them politely, or you can notify the poll watcher. The poll watcher will then potentially either come out and ask, or, talk with the judge of elections, and they might come out. We also want to just be mindful of everyone, including ourselves, not to be blocking a path or a doorway to the polls. It's probably not going to be intentional, but we do want to just make sure there's a clear path to the polls and that we don't appear to be blocking anyone's entrance. So here's your support team. We are here to help you. This is Bella, and I'm Jen, and we are the chair and vice chair of the Ridley Democratic Committee. So we are your main points of contact during the day if anything comes up and you want to run something by us. But first and foremost, if there is a poll watcher at your location and there is a scenario comes up, they would be the first people to try to get in touch with. And like I said before, they can intervene with the judge of elections. If that's unclear where the poll watcher is, or if maybe they've stepped aside for a moment, you can call Bella or Jen. Election protection is also a number that you'll want to have in your phone in case you want to contact them. And then lastly, the judge of elections is on hand to call. They would be calling the constable if there's any potential unrest or concerns about anyone at the polling location, or they're creating a disruption. So the Joe would call the constable. If you feel unsafe for any reason, though, hopefully that will not happen, but if you do, you can always call 911 as well. So we hope that this information gives you a better understanding of things that you can anticipate and who would be your points of contact throughout the day. I would also recommend putting these numbers in your phone so that you have them, so that you can easily access them if you need to. I cannot stress enough how important this role is. Many people often think, what difference can greeting make? It's helpful for voters to see Democrats on the big day. You're going to be the friendly face that they see. There's even a sense of trust that comes along with this role, that they have tied to the party. They trust their party, and you're a representative of that party and that trust. They appreciate the celebratory nature of voting with the I Voter stickers that we hand out. Having the sample ballot that you provide them makes a difference for people who may be confused if Republicans are offering a sample ballot, and they may not be identifying their party. They may not have had time to review all the candidates in advance, and you're providing a reinforcement and a guide for them. Lastly, you just being there and providing a welcoming presence is truly invaluable. So, with that said, I want to thank you so much for viewing this orientation, for taking the time to do this, and for volunteering and for agreeing to serve on Election Day. Your time and energy and talents are just so appreciated by us, and we really look forward to working with you.